Christmas is coming up, so I'm trying my hand at some traditional baking, except I'm modifying the recipe to take out any animal products. Today, I'm making Honigleckerli, or honey treats. I have a childhood memory of the best Christmas cookies I ever had, and I remember a plate of cookies on the counter and next to it a cookbook. Well, I was a kid, so the memory was more like this. I do not actually recall which cookbook it was, but when I pulled this one off the shelf, I found, tucked in the back, a drawing I made in 1986 when I was 5 years old. So this book was definitely around and in use around the time of the memory. That's where my clues end though. So my plan, if you can call it that, is to bake every type of cookie in this book until I find the one I remember. I'm starting with Honigleckerlis in 2 variations. The recipe states that it can be made either with real honey or, as a money-saving measure, with artificial honey. These days, artificial honey has somewhat gone out of use, so I'll have to make my own. If you want to go directly to the cookie recipe, skip ahead to the time on the screen. Artificial honey is basically reduced sugar syrup. The ingredients are sugar, water, and lemon juice. The cookie recipes call for quite a bit of honey, so I scaled the recipe up. Once it's in the pot, put it on the stove on low heat. It'll take longer to reduce, but from what I read, it's important to take your time, so the syrup doesn't burn or turn into rock candy. I own 2 thermometers. The recipe must not go over 100 degrees Celsius, so it's important to keep an eye on temperature. My thermometers are... one is too short and the other is too long, so wish me luck. Stir frequently to make sure everything heats evenly. Almost forgot the lemon juice, but better late than never. Double checking the temperature with the other thermometer, and it's looking like the long thermometer isn't working, so let's get rid of that. Then it's a question of checking temperature and stirring, checking and stirring. At just below 100 degrees, it started bubbling softly. And at that point, I'm trying to keep it at that temperature. Finally, the other thermometer decided to cooperate after all, and because I can just leave it in, it's a lot more convenient. After half an hour, I did the first consistency test. I put a plate in the freezer for a while, then took it out and drizzled a teaspoon of syrup on it. The consistency of the syrup at room temperature is very different from near boiling, so frequent consistency checks are in order. At the first test it was still very liquid, so I let it reduce more and checked consistency every 20 minutes. Finally, after an hour and 20 minutes, I had a consistency of runny honey, so I decided to clear my artificial honey done, take it off the stove and let it cool. And here's a big jar of artificial honey. Just by ingredients, artificial honey is a quarter of the price of real honey. That ignores, of course, electricity and an hour and a half of work. So use honey or quotation marks honey according to your preference. Now let's get baking. The ingredients for the first version of honey treats are honey, vegan butter, sugar, cinnamon, cloves, cardamom, zest of half a lemon, ground almonds, candied lemon peel, candied orange peel, flour and baking powder. First up, the honey goes on the stove to warm up to 60 degrees. While that's happening, zest half a lemon. Get out a big bowl and add the butter, sugar and spices. The book says to add spices but never mentions lemon zest again, so I assume the zest counts as part of the spices. Pour the warm honey and then stir to make everything a fragrant mass. Add the almonds, then the candied citrus goes in, sift the flour and baking powder together. Stir a little and then knead. This dough was way too dry. I assume the vegan butter, which is basically margarine, doesn't melt as rich as proper butter would. So I decided to melt a little extra butter and artificial honey. I kept the list of ingredients as it's given in the book, since maybe I just made a mistake somewhere. But if you make these cookies, keep in mind to have a little extra butter and honey standing by, just in case. Now that is a lovely dough. Next up, according to the book, is to prepare a waxed cookie sheet. It says that baking paper is too weak for this dough and beeswax stops the cookies sticking. There are no instructions on how to wax a cookie sheet. I guess it was a more common practice then and not really worth giving instructions. Whatever the reasons, I'm flying blind. I put the cookie sheet in the oven for 5 minutes to warm it up, and then I'm using beeswax pellets I have left over from making a salve. And I'm using a couple of sheets of kitchen roll to cover the cookie sheet. Now I'm just checking that everything feels waxy. Now add the dough and roll it out to about 1 centimeter of thickness. And it's ready for the oven. The book says to bake at 150 to 180 degrees Celsius and does not give a time, only says to bake until golden brown. For me, this took 20 minutes. While the cookies were in the oven, I thought it was a good time to make the glaze. The book suggests a rum glaze. The ingredients are powdered sugar, lemon juice and rum. For anyone who doesn't use alcohol, making a plain powdered sugar and lemon juice glaze won't detract from the cookies one bit. As I was getting my ingredients together, I noticed that I had used the last of the rum to start a vanilla essence jar, but I only started it a few days ago, so it's still mostly rum with a bit of vanilla as a treat. Getting the book out of the danger zone because I'm about to sift powdered sugar. That looks very lovely and wintry. Juice the lemon. I should have measured the juice instead of just dumping it in, and that's way more than 2 tablespoons, but it worked out fine. I took the rum away to clean the jar and then almost forgot to add it to the glaze. Then I remembered, thank goodness. The dough is baked. Smells sensational. The book says to cut the dough into diamonds while it's still hot. and to glaze once it's not hot anymore but warm. When you make these, I'd suggest waiting with making the glaze until after the dough is out of the oven and cut. Then, by the time the glaze is made, the cookies will have cooled. And the waxing of the cookie sheet really worked. It was a little difficult to get the cookies off the sheet, but nothing got burnt or stuck, and I got quite a nice biceps workout out of it. And we're done with the first variety of Honigleckerli. Let them cool and dry completely, then keep them in a dry, dark place. They are best after 2 to 4 weeks, so if you make them this weekend, they'll be perfect by Christmas. Whether there'll be any left by Christmas is a different question, because they are delicious. Now to the second Honigleckerli. The ingredients are 500 milliliters of honey, sugar, lemon zest, cinnamon, cloves, cardamom, almonds, candied orange peel, cherry schnapps, flour and baking powder. First step is, again, warming up the honey, but this time mixed with sugar. To be heated to 60 degrees Celsius. Pour these extreme amounts of sugars into a large bowl and add spices, almonds and orange peel, and 2 tablespoons of cherry schnapps. As the dough is baked, the alcohol will evaporate, but again, if you do not use alcohol, 2 tablespoons of water will do just fine. Next up, sift the flour and baking powder. Then mix and knead well. While the first dough was too dry, this one is a little on the wet side. For easier handling, I'll stick it in the fridge for a bit. And I noticed I totally forgot the lemon zest. I'll just put the lemon away and pretend nothing happened. Now, for my second attempt at waxing a cookie sheet. I've left the cookie sheet in the oven a little longer and let the beeswax sit and warm up on the sheet for a few minutes. And while the struggle looks the same, it made a big difference. Now get the dough out. The book says to roll out the dough and use cookie cutters. But frankly, rolling out the dough and cutting it after baking was such fun and easy, so I'm ignoring the book here. The dough is still quite sticky, so I'm rolling it out under a sheet of baking paper. And bake as before at 150 to 180 degrees Celsius until golden brown, which for me took 20 minutes. Cut it into diamonds while still hot. And I'm making the glaze now, so the cookies will be cool enough to glaze once I'm done. The book suggests a cherry schnapps glaze. I halved the recipe because I had so much left over last time. The cherry glaze is just a mix of powdered sugar and cherry schnapps. I'm also skipping sifting the powdered sugar because it was just such a mess. Glaze the cookies. Then get them off the cookie sheet with a thin spatula. And once they are dry and cool, put them in a cookie box and keep until Christmas. Now, while neither of these were the cookie I remember from my childhood, both are delicious. Personally, I slightly prefer the first variety, but only by a sliver. Waxing a cookie sheet was an adventure. Baking paper would definitely not work with these cookies. But if you have one of those silicone mats that can go into the oven, those would be perfect and make things much easier. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe?